own. And what he would discover would be incredible. Asmara was originally formed by merging 4 neighborhoods. And when the Italians came to colonize, they found the 4 villages a convenient way to achieve one of their first goals for Asmara: racial segregation. The colonials segregated Asmara into 4 zones: one for Italian, one mixed for Greeks, Arabs, and Jews, and one for indigenous Eritreans. The 4th was reserved for industry. But the Italians still had to eat.
So the Italians inevitably had to conduct business with the Eritreans in order to buy food, and also the road to Massawa, the port where Italian supplies came through, was on the east of the city, near the Eritrean village. So between the Eritrean village and the Italian settlement, there emerged this market area where commerce was conducted.
Exotic spices, aromatic foods, tropical fruits, valuables from far-off lands. To get to the market, these goods had to come on a perilous journey. The road that connected Massawa on the Red Sea to that market was the lifeline of the country. All goods that came to the capital traveled this road, and for Italian tastes, too few goods were getting through this choke point. The reason is as true today as it was then. It was one of the most dangerous roads in the world, with hairpin turns, no guardrails, and straight down drops of hundreds of meters. So to make this 2,400-meter vertical climb to Asmara, the Italians needed a more reliable pipeline. Starting back in 1887, the Italians put their engineering skills to use with an incredibly ambitious project: a railway from Massawa at sea level, rising 2,500 meters nearly straight up to Asmara. The line reached the capital in 1911.
And it's a fantastic feat of architecture out there, you know, I mean the structure. The Italian genius for engineering is phenomenal out there.
The railroad was already in place when Mussolini came to power in 1923, but Il Duce would use it to bring in more than spices. It would now also ferry in the war supplies for his conquest of Africa. Today, it brings railroad aficionados from around the world.
This train is special because it is exactly as it was 100 years ago. The same technology, the same, and it's still working. That means that it was a clever project. They have done a good work.
And like Asmara, the train would segregate people into 3 groups.
It was divided in 3 classes. It was the first class, more expensive and for few people. Then it was a second class, And then the third class for the Eritreans. Very uncomfortable, but much better than walk from Massawa up to Asmara.
And its construction confronted both Eritreans and Italians with severe engineering challenges.
The name of the bridge is Shigirini, which in Tigrinya language means here we have a problem. Especially because it's in a curvature. So when the line arrived here, we used to say every day, Shigirini, Shigirini, how it's a problem now, maybe the line stops here. Then an Italian specialist arrived here. They have built up this bridge, and so they finally understood that it was possible to go on.
Also on was Mussolini's plan for a new Rome. And it was all very Italian. The climate made cafe life thrive. And cinemas. Italians were mad for cinema in the 1920s and 30s, so when Asmara was laid out, Mussolini made sure cinemas and theaters were in abundance.
Asmara as a city is well adorned with cinemas. It was built during the golden age of film, and the Italians, of course, their love of film, weren't afraid to build the structures to promote that. And there are about 4 or 5 very large cinemas, especially for the country the size of Eritrea, in Asmara.
A culture developed in Asmara, of a culture of going to the cinema as a family, you know. And this was at times when movies were really movies also, you know. I mean, I remember long lines of people lining up to see films like, I don't know, Ben-Hur and things like that, you know. I mean, there was a whole atmosphere, a whole culture of the cinema that started with the Italians but continued.
But the cinemas were to keep the Italians and the locals happy. What Mussolini was really building was a stage for himself.
Well, they called it Little Rome, Piccola Roma, which is Little Rome. Their architects of the 1930s were giving a free hand to do what it was that they wanted to do.
And what Mussolini wanted, right down the middle of town, was a broad avenue named the Via Mussolini. The Italians also loved opera, so that avenue would be anchored by an opera house that would also remind locals who was in charge. The opera house, called the Asmara Theater, was built in 1920, and it remains unique in all the world. And it is seen here in high definition for the first time.
It's the most beautiful building inside. The balconies are sort of circular or semicircular in form, overlooking the stage. But above the seated areas is a marvellous fresco painted by an Italian painter of peacocks and ladies dancing. But generally as a theatre for a city like Asmara, it's the most wonderful theatre.
A little research revealed the motives behind the unusual layout of the theater.
No, we watched some show now.
We watched a play, yeah.
It had 2 entrances, a front entrance for Europeans who could sit on the floor level, and a side entrance for Eritreans to use. A winding staircase took Eritreans to the balconies, so Europeans would not have to encounter them.
Sometimes they were not even allowed to watch the same film or the same show together. So there was an apartheid system in Eritrea long before in South Africa.
In addition to opera, the Asmara Theater staged movies, plays, and concerts. It would not be the only manifestation of how fascism would come to Asmara. Asmara was in fact being laid out purposefully to facilitate an even larger project. It would be from here that Mussolini would launch his invasion of Ethiopia, using Asmara as its jumping-off point. In the center of Asmara, on what was the Via Mussolini, is another modern building, but not just another. Today, it's the Ministry of Education. But in 1923, this building was christened the Casa del Fascio, literally the fascist house. And again, the blueprints reveal the politics behind the design.
Mussolini had planned to come and visit Asmara. And if you've noticed, the Ministry of Education building has the shape of an axe, the fash. You know, the fascist army's symbol was the axe.
It would be a fitting symbol. A look at the original Italian blueprints offers more specific proof. A balcony from which Mussolini would address his public.
And so he had planned to build a huge square, including the post office, and address the people of Asmara.
It would be Mussolini's stage for the opening shots of World War II. Architecture and war were coming together in Asmara. In October 1935, 400,000 Italian soldiers crossed from Eritrea and Italian Somaliland into Ethiopia. Awaiting them were about 500,000 Ethiopians under Emperor Haile Selassie. It should have been an Italian rout. But the Ethiopian military surprised the world with its skill. Their Christmas counteroffensive shocked the Italians with its ferocity. But it only forestalled the inevitable. It took the Italians a year to conquer Ethiopia. They resorted to mustard gas to finish the job. The ousted emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, fled to London. Selassie warned the League of Nations, "It is us today. Tomorrow, it is you." 3 years later, Hitler invaded Poland. For 4 years, the region lived under brutal fascist rule. Il Duce was still in a hurry. In 1940, Italy invaded its British-held neighbors Somaliland and Sudan. But behind the lines, a stubborn insurgency kept the Italians off guard. In January 1941, the British launched a counteroffensive into Ethiopia and Eritrea. By May, Eritrea was in British hands, and Haile Selassie was returned to the throne in Ethiopia. But more than 750,000 Ethiopians and Eritreans had died at their hands. In 1943, Mussolini was overthrown, and in 1945, he was executed in Italy by communist partisans. His body and that of his mistress hung from meat hooks